The horse trailer rolled through the iron gates just as the sun slipped behind the low Texas hills, throwing copper light across the dry fields. Dust swirled behind the tires as it came to a slow stop in front of the main barn at Hollow Creek Ranch. Mason Caldwell stepped down from the porch, wiping his hands on a rag. He wasn't expecting a delivery. He hadn't ordered any new livestock, and certainly not a mare. The ranch had been quieter these days. Too quiet, some might say, since his wife passed and most of the hands moved on. The trailer door creaked open. Inside stood a thin bay mare with a white blaze down her face, her ribs faintly visible, her dark eyes wide with confusion. A shipping tag hung loosely from her halter. "Delivery for Caldwell Ranch," the driver called, checking his clipboard. Mason frowned. "You sure about that?" "Address matches." Mason stepped forward, taking the papers. His name was there, but the order form was strange. No purchase history, no signature he recognized, just a short note attached. "Deliver to Hollow Creek Ranch. She belongs there." "That's odd," Mason muttered. The driver shrugged. "Been a long haul from Oklahoma. I just drop 'em where I'm told." The mare shifted nervously as they lowered the ramp. She hesitated, then stepped down slowly, her hooves touching Texas soil like she wasn't sure she was allowed. Mason studied her carefully. She was underweight, coat dull, but there was something gentle about her stance, something broken, maybe. "I didn't order her," Mason said again, more to himself than to the driver. "Well, she's here now," the driver replied, climbing back into his truck. "Good luck." The truck disappeared in a cloud of dust, leaving Mason alone with the mare. From the porch, a small figure watched. 7-year-old Ellie Caldwell clutched the wooden railing, her curls bouncing in the breeze. She hadn't spoken much in months, not since the accident that took her mother. Words had become heavy things, too hard to carry. But when she saw the horse, her eyes widened. Mason led the mare toward the paddock. "Guess we'll sort this out tomorrow," he murmured. The mare walked quietly beside him, head low, as if expecting to be turned away. Ellie slipped off the porch and padded across the yard in her bare feet. Mason noticed her only when she stopped a few feet from the horse. "Easy, sweetheart," he said softly. "She's new." Ellie didn't look at him. She looked at the mare. The mare looked back. Something passed between them, something quiet and unspoken. Ellie took one small step forward. The mare didn't flinch. Another step. Mason held his breath. This was the closest Ellie had willingly come to any animal since the funeral. She used to love riding, used to laugh so loud the barn swallows would scatter from the rafters. Now she barely smiled. Ellie lifted her small hand, hesitating mid-air. The mare lowered her head, and then, in a voice so soft Mason almost thought he imagined it, Ellie whispered, "Mama?" The word shattered the stillness. Mason felt it like a punch to the chest. Ellie pressed her palm against the mare's cheek. "You came back," she said, her voice trembling but certain. The mare exhaled slowly, warm breath brushing Ellie's hair. She didn't move away. Instead, she leaned just slightly into the child's touch. Mason swallowed hard. "Ellie, honey." But Ellie was already wrapping her arms as far as they could go around the mare's neck. The horse stood perfectly still, as if she understood that moving would break something fragile. Tears slid down Ellie's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I knew you would," she whispered. Mason turned away for a moment, dragging a hand across his face. He didn't believe in signs. He believed in hard work, long days, and the fact that sometimes life was cruel for no reason at all. But standing there, watching his silent daughter cling to a lost, unwanted horse like she'd found a missing piece of her heart, he wasn't so sure anymore. That night, he made a few phone calls. By morning, he had answers. The mare had been part of a small breeding ranch in Oklahoma that went under after a bankruptcy. Several horses were auctioned off, paperwork rushed and sloppy. Somehow, this mare's destination had been mixed up. She was supposed to go to another buyer 3 counties over. "I can have her picked up by Friday," the auction manager said over the phone. Mason looked out the window. Ellie was in the paddock, sitting cross-legged in the dirt beside the mare. She was talking, not loudly, not clearly enough to make out every word, but talking. The mare stood close, head lowered toward the little girl like a guardian. Friday was 3 days away. "I'll call you back," Mason said quietly. Over the next few days, something remarkable happened. Ellie started waking up early again. She ate breakfast without being reminded. She actually asked if she could brush the mare. They named her Grace. Ellie insisted on it, because she found her way, she explained simply. Grace followed Ellie around the paddock like a shadow. When Ellie stumbled, Grace nudged her upright. When Ellie sat in the grass, Grace stood watch. Mason noticed the change not just in his daughter, but in the horse too. Grace's eyes weren't as hollow anymore. She nickered softly when Ellie approached. She began finishing her feed. The dullness in her coat slowly gave way to a faint shine. It was as if they were healing each other. Friday came too quickly. Mason's phone felt heavier than usual in his hand. He'd delayed calling the auction house back, knowing what he had to do. The ranch finances weren't strong. Taking on another horse, especially one with no clear purpose, wasn't practical. He stepped outside. Ellie was attempting to braid a section of Grace's mane, tongue poking out in concentration. Grace stood patient as ever. Mason walked over slowly. "Ellie bug," he said gently. She looked up, wary. "You remember how Grace came here by mistake?" Ellie's hands stilled. "She has another place she's supposed to go." Silence. Grace flicked her ear. Ellie's small fingers tightened in the horse's mane. "No," she said softly. Mason crouched down. "Sweetheart, sometimes things don't stay just because we want them to." Ellie's chin trembled. For a moment, Mason feared the quiet wall would come back up, brick by brick. But instead of shutting down, Ellie stood. She placed both hands on Grace's face and pressed her forehead against the mare's. "You said mamas don't leave unless they have to." Mason's breath caught. "I already lost one," Ellie said, her voice breaking. "I can't lose another." Grace shifted, stepping closer, almost wrapping herself around the child. Mason looked at the two of them, his grieving daughter and this misplaced, gentle creature who had somehow stepped into the empty space without being asked. Maybe it was a mistake, or maybe it wasn't. He stood slowly, pulling his phone from his pocket. The auction manager answered on the second ring. "About that pickup," Mason began. He watched as Ellie buried her face into Grace's neck. "We won't be needing it." There was paperwork to sort out, fees to negotiate. It wasn't simple, it wasn't cheap, but by Sunday afternoon, Grace officially belonged to Hollow Creek Ranch. Ellie insisted on being there when Mason signed the final document. She held Grace's lead rope with solemn pride. "She's home now," Ellie declared, and for the first time in nearly a year, Mason saw something he thought might be gone forever. Hope. Months passed. Spring painted the ranch in wildflowers. Grace regained her strength fully, her coat gleaming in the sun. Ellie began riding again, slowly at first, just walking gentle circles in the paddock. Laughter returned to the barn. One evening, as Mason leaned against the fence watching Ellie ride bareback through the golden light, he realized something. Grace had not replaced Ellie's mother. No one could. But she had carried Ellie through the darkest stretch of grief, offering steady warmth where there had only been cold silence. Sometimes healing didn't come the way you expected. Sometimes it arrived in a dusty trailer, mislabeled and unwanted. As Ellie guided Grace toward him, her smile wide and fearless, Mason felt a quiet gratitude settle in his chest. "Daddy," Ellie called, "look how fast we can go." Grace trotted proudly, mane streaming, Ellie's laughter ringing across Hollow Creek Ranch like music.
Mason smiled, blinking against the sting in his eyes. Delivered to the wrong ranch, maybe, but exactly where she was meant to be.